Hi, everyone. Good morning and good evening. Maybe that's where you're at, depending on which part of the world you're from. Thank you for joining me live in our live learning today. This is something we're experimenting with on our Facebook page to make it easy for you to attend some of these live trainings. In the past, if you've joined me in live webinars or live training in the past, we've used a different system of webinars to be able to get you this information. But we thought, hey, why don't we use something that you're on here quite often, right? And it gives a chance for you to just come on in and not have to sign up for anything to watch our training. And we will be doing these things about once a month. And it's really great for me because I get to interact with you live and collaborate with you live here and be able to have these collaborative discussions around all things with life and career transition, building your side hustles, and creating that life of freedom and work of freedom that you're probably here to try to do for yourself. So today's topic is all about 3 ways to overcome your fear of uncertainty. So if you're here to learn, you're probably in the midst of some sort of change. And if you're joining me live, I would love to hear from you. What sorts of change is currently going on in your life? And what is it about your fear of uncertainty that you would love to learn about today? So this could be your personal life, right? Things that are going on and changes in your personal life. Maybe it's your work. You're looking to quit your job and doing something different with your life. Or relationships or environmental, anything that you're going through change with. I would love to hear what is happening in your life today, and what fears do you think is creeping up when you feel uncertain. Now, this is really normal to feel ungrounded and a little bit, frazzled when we are pursuing a path that is less ordinary, right? Maybe no one around your life is about to make the changes that you're about to make, and there is no rules and guidebook for you to sort of be tapping into. A lot of times when we live a very conventional life, a very traditional life, lots of these rules have been given to us in some way, right? We kind of know we have to go to university or go to school, right? We graduate hopefully with a degree that will last us forever till the day we die, or that's what we've been told. We also know that in a particular type of profession or vocation, there is some rules around that. How many years you have to be in a position to be able to upgrade to a manager role or whatever credential that you're looking to go after. There's other people beyond you, right, that have sort of paved the path in some way to show you what you need to be doing. But however, when you go off the beaten track, when you don't follow traditional conventional rules, which is why you're here, it can be exciting that you're finally taking control of your life and being creative in the way that you want to reinvent your life and go towards the outcomes that you truly want to have. But then it also comes with this feeling of absolute overwhelm and fear because you get to make up your own rules now, right? The power of freedom is exciting, but fucking scary at the same time. And I think, as much as you hear success stories about how people have done what they've done, we also need to talk a lot about that uncertainty period of time, that, a lot of the emotional resilience that needs to be cultivated at this moment in time in order to have you do the things that you want to do but have never done before. Right? So our brains at this moment in time can really can really project all sorts of stories, right? That can make you feel really panicked, that keeps you sort of stuck in where you think you should be. And it's really hard to play big when we feel so scared, right? And when we take this leap of faith, when we believe that if we take this leap of faith of what we're about to do, this can potentially lead to very disastrous outcomes. And that will very likely send all sorts of panic modes or panic alert bells in your head that will sort of sabotage you, right, from making any move at all. So today's collaborative discussion is we're going to really talk about how to build your tolerance for change and uncertainty in order to live your best version of your life, where you do make up the rules, but you're also really mindful about what you need to do for yourself in order to go through that change and build that resilience for change. And it's not something that you just sort of get up and it happens to you, right? It's a muscle that you really need to build. So if you're joining me live or watching the replay, we do have a resource for you that I've created to sort of help you follow through with what we're going to be discussing today. And it might be something you replay again, even if you're joining me live here, where you walk yourself through some of these clarity questions that I've constructed for you to help walk you through these 3 points that we're going to talk about today. So if you haven't downloaded it already, we have a guide and a resource tool with these clarity questions I'll be going through today. That you can have handy as you listen to this training, where you can download it above this post that has a link to it that will allow you to download that guide and follow through as we walk through these questions together. Okay, so that should be a ConvertKit page where you can just enter your email and they'll send it to you by email, and then you can download that Google Doc and follow through as we go along. Okay. So if you're joining me live here or on the replay, I do have a question for you to get started. I would love to know, and you can post below this video in the comments field, is what scares you most about taking the leap to an unfamiliar or uncertain path? What scares you most about taking the leap to an unfamiliar or uncertain path? I would love to hear from you. Some of you guys might be taking the leap into entrepreneurship. Some of you might be taking the leap just to have the bravery to tell your spouse you're about to change jobs. Some of you may be actually moving countries and maybe trying to live somewhere more affordable for your escape plan, and that is scary for you. Whatever it is, I would love to hear what scares you most about taking the leap to an unfamiliar or uncertain path. All right, so as we introduce this topic today, what I want you to know is that in society, we have been given these rules, as we talked about, of how to get to traditional trajectories of success, right? We've learned it from our parents, we've learned it from our teachers, we've learned it from other people who are doing the same things. So when we do change our path, it can feel really ungrounding and shaky to take that leap into the unknown, right? And this uncertainty really fills us with these feelings of fear, panic, and anxiety. And then what we do is we start to create these stories, right? These worst case scenarios, like if I start this business and I fail, I'll be a laughing stock in my community. Or, you know, I've been a lawyer for 20 years and now I'm wanting to be a novelist. You know, what will people think of me? Maybe they'll think I'm having a midlife crisis too early, or, you know, I'm giving up on something that I know how to do. So we always sort of make up a lot of these stories, and it's great to be mindful of what these stories are, because it kind of tells you a lot about your biggest fear. And we want to be able to utilize these fears appropriately. Nothing is wrong with fear. Nothing's wrong with feeling afraid. That's the first thing I want to say. Nothing's wrong with you. Every normal person has fear, and fear just doesn't mean that you shouldn't be going forward with the path that you want to be creating for yourself. So when we do end up playing small because of this fear, we sort of play into our fears as well by either never moving at all or moving very tentatively, like sort of not fully committing to that leap, right? And hence why a lot of times you might feel that I've been thinking about these awesome goals that I want to make for my life, but they just never come into fruition. It's very likely it's because you haven't gone all in. You haven't actually really navigated a lot of what your fears are trying to tell you, right? In order to create the right action to actually be able to do this effectively and to feel good while you do it. You're sort of shoving it under the rug, hoping that you'll get brave, but not actually really moving towards doing anything at all. Right? As I said, very normal occurrence when we're about to do something big or something different in our lives. So what we want to try to do instead of this being very stuck point of where we're at is to build a tolerance for change and for a tolerance for uncertainty so that we can keep moving forward despite feeling the fear. So we're going to start with these 3 lessons that I've learned personally myself on how I do this. Hi, Heather. Great for you to join us. And I want to share with you these 3 big lessons that actually help move the needle for me. And by the way, you know, 5.5 years later of being an entrepreneur, I am still scared shitless of lots of things. It doesn't mean I have the superhero cape where I've just been like the most bravest woman I ever have imagined. It's just that I got a lot better at moving faster and moving despite the fear and being able to actually self-analyze and self-assess and help myself through that fear, right? Rather than just remaining comfortable, right? And neutral in the place that I'm in. Hey, Bettina. All right, let's go into lesson 1. What's the first thing that I would want you to know about in terms of building your tolerance and your resilience for change? The first lesson is don't avoid the feeling of discomfort. That is the number one thing you should stop doing, is feeling bad and shameful about having discomfort. One of my favorite TED Talk speakers, and you might have heard of her on the TED Talk, her name's Susan David. She's the author of Emotional Agility. She says a quote that I love all about this topic. She says, discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life. Now, that is such a refreshing take on not actually going fight the fear and, punch fear in the face and who cares? Because actually we do care. We do get emotionally fucked up when we feel the feelings of failure and self-doubt, and when we have imposter syndrome, for example. We have to acknowledge that these feelings are happening. And there's nothing wrong with fear. So if you ever watch Susan Davis' TED Talk around emotional agility and emotional resilience, she really talks about actually allowing yourself to actually be empathetic and lean into that fear, because acknowledging it helps you to recognize what it's trying to tell you. And also it gives you actual practical actions that you might need to be cultivating in order to move past that fear. Now, there is a lot of value in fears if we choose to utilize it as a tool to give us clues for knowing what actions we need to take. Because very likely the fear is actually almost like, an alarm bell, right? Oh, wait a second, we're about to do something abnormal. I want you to be safe. So why don't we think about this? That's what fear's usually trying to tell you, right? But when we avoid feeling scared, when we don't admit that we're scared, when we actually pretend to be brave, we sort of add this extra layer of weight. And I feel that it's this feeling of shame and guilt. Anyone here feels shameful for not being brave? Or when you look at other people making these big leaps, or your friends starting businesses so quickly, or whatever it may be, you're like, why not me? Why am I so slow? Why am I so scared, right? So when you give yourself this hard time for being a scaredy cat, you're actually really, in a way, putting this extra weight of shame and guilt that is not helpful to get to where you want to go. Because when we feel shame and guilt, right, anytime we do that, we become 5 years old again, and we're like, no, not going anywhere. It's going under the blankets. I don't want to deal with this, because now you've added an extra layer of feelings, right? So first you were just scared, and now you're shameful of that fear, right? And that's this extra layer we don't need to put upon ourselves. So not sure if you guys do that to yourself. I sure do. I'm very much of a perfectionist, someone that likes to do things without failing. So when I feel scared, I feel like I'm losing control, right? I don't have control over my circumstance. And that is something I'm not used to having, being someone who is a perfectionist. And so when I feel shameful, I don't ask for help. I don't go and get a mentor. I don't actually talk about what I feel about my fear. And that actually shoves it under the rug and doesn't give me any insight to play with. And that can absolutely be happening to you. So instead of piling on the extra weight of shame and guilt, I would like for you to ask these questions. And again, if you downloaded the free document and the free guide and clarity questions, you'll get these questions to go over again after this training. But here's some of the questions to ask yourself instead, right? When you start feeling these injections of fear. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of and why? We want to get to the root of why the fear is coming up, right? You might be actually sometimes saying, oh, I'm afraid of doing my business or creating a business that's not successful. But if you keep asking why you're afraid of that and kind of keep going down the rabbit hole of asking why, you might actually get to the root that a lot of it might be things like being judged for failing, right? Or losing an identity that other people rely on you for, or your family has to rely on you for, and you can't be successful in that identity anymore. Maybe it's your fear of success. Some people might think that if I'm actually successful, things might have to change around my life. I might have to have more boundaries around my relationships. I might actually have to put myself first when I choose this path. And that can scare a lot of people. I work with a lot of moms as well, by the way. And moms feel huge shame all the time doing something of their own because their identity has been tied to being a great wife, being a great mother, and doing that first, prioritizing other people. And if they were to put themselves first, what they're most afraid of is other people are going to feel that they're failing them or they're abandoning them. And they don't want that sort of identity with their family and friends. And that might actually be your fear, So it's really great to acknowledge what that is. Another question to ask yourself is, what am I hiding from? Right? What am I really hiding from? So if I know what I need to do to get to where I need to go, right? And I know what I'm afraid of, but just willing to go through that fear. But what am I really hiding from? Maybe it's that I do have a voice. I recognize I have a voice to share. Hence why that's my motivation to start a business, for example, right? Or I want more meaning in my work. So I'm wanting to take more control over the way that I create my role. But I might be hiding from that because I may not feel that my voice is good enough. Or I might feel like I'm not a new voice in the industry and will anyone listen to me, right? There could be all sorts of reasons about what you're hiding from. And again, it could be about this new identity or new role you're about to step into that you're super afraid to show up for. Another question to ask is, am I afraid of the process or the result? Now, what I mean by that, some people are afraid of the process because they actually need to have steps, right? They actually need to know, I don't have clarity. I know where my goal is, but actually I don't know how to get there. You know, I might need to break it down further, and that's maybe the work that you need to do, breaking down that work. That is the journey or the map to get to the goal and the result. Or it could be about the result itself. What if the goal changes everything else in my life? What if I decide to actually change my relationship? Sometimes that happens. I've had people that change their lives and end up getting a divorce. That is not usually the outcome that we want to advocate, but that happens when you have a life change. Other parts of your life could change. So you want to sort of identify, what are you most afraid of? Is it the process or the result? And then lastly, what's the worst case scenario and how likely is it going to happen? So we talked a lot about your brain injecting all sorts of worst case scenarios, right? Building up stories of failure that can happen before you do something. So what is that story like? Let your egoistic brain sort of pan that out. Let it have its way of talking and sort of look and see where it's bringing you. A lot of my fears end up telling me I'll be homeless and alone. Anyone else have that same fear? Hey, Annie, nice to see you, Annie. So really get through to that story of what that ego is trying to tell you that could happen to you. Let it have this worst case scenario meltdown, and purge, but then actually recognize, like, how likely is it going to happen? Is this something, am I really going to be homeless if I have a degree? I could find a job elsewhere. I could make ends meet if I need to. I could move in with my mother if necessary. It's not ideal, but I will not be on the streets. Sometimes we have to sort of take a look at what is actually realistic, because fear tends to sort of produce all sorts of unrealistic scenarios that will never come true, but we need to sort of let it talk it out so that it has its say and it's not shoved under the rug. So if you're listening today, I have a question for you. What are you afraid of and why? Right? So if you went through some of those questions, Jen, you said you have that fear of being homeless. I think we all do sometimes when we've grown up in very sort of poor families. Like I have definitely done that. And I have a horrible relationship with money back in the day. So, that was a fear that came up for me. But if I really looked at all the times I've never been unemployed, I've always tried to be employed. I know that I have skills to share, even if it's not my own business. You know that you can help yourself, right? And that sometimes you have to put those conditions in place to allow your brain to sort of recognize there is an alternative plan in case something doesn't work out for you, right? So what are you afraid of? Get real honest. And this is where you might do it in this platform, is what are you afraid of and why? Right? And go through some of the questions that you downloaded to get through to those clarity questions. All right, lesson number 2 on how to build your tolerance for uncertainty and change. Lesson number 2 is identify the missing skill, knowledge, or awareness that can ease your fears. Now, you may have heard me say this before if you've attended other trainings in the past, is that fear is really just, in my opinion, a missing gap of information, a missing gap of knowledge, skills, and awareness that's very likely causing your anxiety and your fear. If you don't know something, we can actually have a proactive action to find out what those missing gaps of information is for me. So for people who are afraid to start a business, for example, a very practical question or missing gap of information is, I don't know my strengths enough to know what business to start. I don't know if my strengths will be valued if I try to make money with it. And those are good questions. Like, those are not questions to ignore, and I think that's something to explore, in terms of what can I do about this question that's going to allow me to ease this fear a little bit. So some of the questions you can ask here in this sort of second step is, can I get more information to gain better clarity? What am I missing in terms of my own self-awareness of my strengths or whatever it is that's missing for you? Do I have a knowledge gap about the thing that I'm about to do, right? So some people I have, talk about digital nomadism. They're like, I want to move to Bali just like you. I want to move somewhere else and be location independent, but that scares the shit out of me. And that could be because you don't know what it feels like to live in a country like that. You don't know what it feels like to make an income from a country like that. You don't know what kind of business to start maybe to make money from being abroad. And that is the missing gap you will need to get help with or explore or experiment or research on in order for you to feel that you can move abroad, right? Jen, you said, let me go back in there. I think you said something about, it just disappeared, the comment. But I think you said something about afraid of being successful, right? Just in case, or not being successful, sorry. And you might have to go back in the workforce, right? And that feeling of shame. That happens to a lot of people. And a lot of times it's all in our heads. We've sort of predetermined what people will judge us on and criticize us on. But your worst critic is very likely yourself. And you're probably the one that's going to judge yourself more than other people. I think most people already know you're brave for trying to take that leap. And even if you decide to change paths or you might have to get a part-time job, they're probably still admiring you for even taking the leap because they're not going to do that as much as you have, you know? So you have to give yourself kudos for giving a try and know that even if you have to get a job, that's no shame in that. We have to pay the bills. We have to feed the kids. We have to have a roof over our head. And it's totally okay to have side hustles, right? I have clients that drive Uber, you know, or babysit or dog sit as a way of making a side income, you know, while they pursue their core business, because we know that income doesn't come right away. And there's no shame in doing all that as you transition. And you need to let go of that feeling of being perfect, you know, feeling good about that, which I think starts from ourselves, right? Annie, you said your fear of not knowing what I'm good at. Yeah, that is a fear a lot of people have about leaving their jobs. So your job is not to perpetuate that fear, right? By just saying, I don't know what I'm good at. It's actually to say, well, what can I be good at? What sorts of assessments can I do to myself? What do I need to get a coach, a career coach, or an identification of skills assessment, right? Just sort of look at my inventory of jobs I've done in the past, what I've been actually has been meaningful for me to do. And can I explore actually trying out that role, you know? So if I'm good at writing, for example, but I've never done it to make an income, could you just offer to write for other people for free? You know, could you put yourself up on Fiverr.com and actually do 1,000 words to edit someone's manual or, you know, write a bio page for someone and test out your skills before you can actually say, I don't have anything to offer, right? So that idea of experimentation, Annie, for you is going to be really important so that fear isn't creeping up the entire time. Another question to ask yourself is, what don't I know about myself, my motivation, or my values that should be driving my actions, right? A lot of times we might have these dreams, these goals of what we want to have, this amazing paradise on the other side of the rainbow, but we have to know why that whole thing of what we're trying to achieve is important to us. Why is it more important than the fear itself? You know, the cost of not pursuing my dreams, the cost of not going after something I've been thinking about for so many, many moons. You know, what's that costing me to remain where we're at? A lot of times we look at the cost of failure, the cost of like shit not working out, but we also don't look at the cost of like, well, if I'm unwilling to go through that discomfort, right, and trying new things, what could also happen that's really costly for me forever if I don't make a move, right? And what values are really, you know, driving my actions for change? So for example, if my value is truly freedom, right? Freedom to express myself, freedom to do work I love, freedom to live from anywhere, and I remain here as where I am, then I'm not honoring my values. And do I want to live that way, right? So we have to be really honest about what those values are and how that can actually be a lot of a higher priority than the value of our fears. And then lastly, you only know what you know. So sometimes you have to sort of outsource your worries and outsource your concerns to someone else, to support systems that we can absolutely be cultivating in our environment to actually instill newfound knowledge into our circumstance. So the question you can ask is, do I know someone who has been in this position where I am, who can provide detail around what currently feels abstract and scary? So if you can't get that information or things feel super hazy, you've done your research, you've done that self-accountability and self-assessment, and you're still missing in like, how can I really do this? What should I be doing, you know, to eliminate this fear or know the right steps, right, to get to my goal? You might actually need to talk to other people. Is there anyone living a life that you currently are hoping to lead, or starting a business you want to start, right? Or having, being able to hire a mentor or a coach, or some sort of advisor that can help you, that have done what you are planning to do and can shortcut you to answers? or just having these conversations with other people that might be taking a leap themselves. They might have gone through some ways of doing so that can be really helpful to you as you do this change, right? Don't always try to take it on your own. It can be very lonely and scary dealing with fear that way, but actually find communities and find people to outsource that worry to by asking that same question. So I have a question for you in this lesson. What do you think is the missing gap of knowledge, skills, or self-awareness that you need to find out more about at this current moment that's going to help you ease this fear a little bit? And I promise you, if you sit with each of these questions one by one and answer them from an honest place, you will have clarity on what to do next, because your answers will provide information to really create an action list from an empowered place and really allow you to grow and succeed. So share with me, what do you think is your missing gap of knowledge and skills and awareness that can help you, if you know that answer, whether it's outsourcing it or finding it out on your own, can help you get to your goal in a much more easier way. Okay, let me know in the comments. Okay, lastly, lesson number 3. Build your tolerance for uncertainty by making micro decisions. Okay, so as I mentioned in the beginning, I wasn't very brave myself. I still am not always the bravest person in the room. But what I do really well in these days is I make smaller decisions in order to allow myself to be closer to the bigger goal and the bigger dream that I have for my life and for my business, for anything that I choose to do that is my better version of life. Now, most humans are not like a Tony Robbins style person. We aren't just people that face adversity really well and just sort of go, I can do this, and I can just, talk myself into doing things. Tony Robbins is a beast of a man, and he's amazing, and that's why he does what he does. But most of us may not be in that state of mind, or even in a circumstance at the moment that, that really makes us feel very brave. And that's really normal. I think 99% of people are here because most of us are not we'll jump off a cliff and hope a parachute opens kind of people. We are people that take calculated risks. We're people that need to feel some safety net. We need some safety net to make small jumps, right? So we need to sort of dictate for ourselves what is that next safety net we have to create in order for us to just move slowly and more sustainably towards our big goals. Because the truth is, incremental decisions and actions are really what gets you to your goal in more of a sustainable way and less of an emotional, burdening way when you can do things slowly, right? Slowly but surely. But you do something, right? Something small every single time. So to not scare the shit out of yourself and talk yourself out of things more often than not, because you've jumped way too fast or you have overplanned things or you have too high of expectations for yourself, we do need to take smaller bites, right, towards our goals to really ease ourselves into courage, right? That's the only way to build that muscle of resilience and build that muscle of courage. So whenever you feel really scared, when you look at your goal and you go, holy shit, that feels so far, that feels like something I can't achieve right away, you're right. So what can you do instead, right, in order to make this work for you? So instead of looking at what won't work, what is hard, what is difficult, or what feels hard, shift your focus to what can work. What can I do? What can I be accountable for today and capable of doing today that can let this be easy, right? If it feels too difficult, you've chewed off too big of a step, right? Or you haven't found out enough information to make that step. And that's where your work should be at. Okay. And I always love asking myself whenever I feel a bit trumped by what to do next is, what is one small thing I can do today to honor the goals that are important to me? Just one thing. And that could be just picking up the phone and calling someone that can get me out of this rut of feeling bad about myself. Or one thing I can do is actually just stop thinking about the future and focus on what I can do to really help with my environment today. Or do one small thing, with Annie, you said, I don't know what I might be good at, right? I don't know what I can do with my skills. That maybe one of the things to do is not to know what business to start, but actually to go, what am I good at? Let me take a notepad of paper out and actually start taking inventory of skills that I know how to do, things that I know that other people may not know how to do, and I can give value publicly with it. And it might be something to experiment with. That can be a great place to start and something very doable. Then let's just start a business today, right? That's too big of a goal to meet. And one really big important question to really ask yourself here is, what am I willing to tolerate to have what's really important to me? I really love this question because, one of my favorite writers is Mark Manson, right? And Mark Manson says, every decision you're ever going to make, you're going to eat a shit sandwich, right? And you got to discover or identify which shit sandwich you're willing to swallow, because anything that you do, even if you're passionate about something, even if you found your passion, which you thought, great, that is awesome, that passion will still come with a shit sandwich. That passion will still have a cost in a way of pursuing it. But we want to at least make that thing that you're about to pursue really worthwhile, that you're willing to actually tolerate some of these shit sandwiches you're about to eat, because the reward of that goal, or that reward of that decision, is going to, be a lot more rewarding, and a lot more, it trumps, that fear that you're going to feel while doing it. So for example, if you're an artist, okay, you love to sell your paintings or your art, or you love to design, right? If you want to be an artist and you want to be known to be an artist and you want to advocate for yourself as an artist, you're going to need to tolerate being rejected. Because that's what happens to artists and musicians and creative people. I'm not an art person. I can barely draw a stick man, but I do look at my work as a piece of art, right? I write about the things I care about. When I teach something, it comes from my heart. It doesn't really come too much from the logical brain. And that's something around the passion that I'm, backing. But to put myself out there, to talk to you guys today live, like, people could be like, you're full of shit and I don't believe what you're saying, or I don't want to do that. I'm going to have to tolerate this idea of being rejected and criticized in order to advocate for my art. So to me, everyone is an artist in some form or another. You don't have to be a musician or a writer or a painter to be an artist. You're putting creative things out there to help in the world, and you will be criticized, and you will have naysayers and people that don't believe in your work. But you'll have to tolerate that shit sandwich, because the idea of actually impacting some people and being able to say your thing and spread your voice around the world and spread your message, that might actually be the thing that you're most rewarded with. But you also have to deal with this, right? The toleration of being rejected. And that's something to accept. And when we can accept that some of our goals and decisions we're about to make in life will come with hard things, then you're less likely to beat yourself up about going through some of that uncertainty and going through a bit of those hard moments of, rejection or difficulty or failure, because it's just part of the formula. Nothing's wrong has happened to you. And when we don't feel a feeling of wrongness, then we don't feel as much of that shame and that guilt we just talked about in the beginning, right? Less of that weight of shame and guilt. So what I would love to hear from you is also, what's one small thing? Post in the comments below. If you were to look at that fear that you have, or the uncertainty that you have about moving forward with a goal that you have, what is just one small thing you can do today, right? Like just I said, pick up the phone, write a list of inventory, do some research. What is that one small bite-sized action that can be done in like an hour that can help you at least honor the goal, even if it's not going to get you there right away? It's a step forward towards it. So as you do more of these micro decisions in your life, making small decisions, right, towards your goal instead of taking a big chunk, you can really build this tolerance through this muscle, because muscle is built through experience. Because a lot of times when you do fail, which you will, you can actually say, oh, I totally failed there. I fucked it all up, but I didn't die, right? It wasn't the last thing that ever happened to me. And I can get up again, dust myself off, and begin again. Right? But we do need that exposure therapy to be able to face reality, see that actually what we've concocted in our stories and our worst case scenarios did not happen. And that's going to help us to actually do that better again, over and over again, right? Exposure therapy is your friend. And we do that a lot, definitely, in, my students in, the academy or the retreat that we run. We call this imperfect action. And we also call this scare-sighted. Scare-sighted is being scared about doing something, but you're also really excited. And it's usually the indicator you want to do that thing really badly. You're not just excited. A lot of things you're about to do well and you want to do bigger in your life will come with those mixed feelings of being excited and really scared shitless. And that's the sign you should be looking for. If you're just like, oh my God, this is awesome, and I'm not scared at all, you may not actually be playing that big. You might actually just not be at the cusp of your comfort zone. And it may not be exactly the biggest piece of what you want to do, right? So build your tolerance for uncertainty by making micro decisions. All right, so hopefully that was helpful for you, those 3 steps on how to overcome your fear of uncertainty and build your tolerance for change. They're very practical, very doable that you can start doing today if you have been mulling over, right, some things to change in your life and what you want to make some moves on. Not everything is done overnight. We do have to have the patience and we have to build that mastery of how we deal with change and how to deal with our emotional resilience that isn't just something you cultivate from, that's overnight, right? That just puts on this brave face to do it. We have to really analyze a lot of our behavior, a lot of what we're saying to ourselves and our mindset and our inner languaging that's either keeping us stuck on where we don't want to be or moving us forward with more positive reinforcement. And action's always great for that, right? Clarity always comes from imperfect action. So if you haven't done that already, there is a downloadable, which is a resource of a guide. And these clarity questions that we went over today that you can sit alone on a coffee shop or, get a glass of wine and just start actually reflecting on those questions for yourself so that when you're about to tackle that things that feels really scary, this can really ease your fears a little bit and ease you into the confidence that you need to feel to pursue the best version of your life and your work. Thank you guys for joining me. As I said, we go on live for these live learnings once a month, and we always love to hear from you. So if there's anything that you would love to learn in future live learnings, what we can do to be of service to you, what we can break down, just like what we did today to help you move forward with your big goals, all you have to do is ask. So comment below the video on this live stream, or if you're watching this replay, and we'll make sure that we're creating these lessons for you for free so that you can continuously collaborate and learn with us on a virtual level and share with us on what you're learning in this community. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you guys in our next live learning. Have a good day. Bye.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Hansen, and I am thoroughly delighted to be with you here in this Neurodharma webinar. I'm amazed, as usual, that the technology works in the ways that it does, and that I can be sharing with you here from my home office, a converted laundry room, and beaming out into the interwebs, as it were, and that you're here with me and that you're here with each other. There are already well over 200 people in this webinar, and we certainly expect more. So I want to really thank you for joining and investing yourself in this process of exploration. I think that's one of the most fundamental things. That's where we start, right? We take the first step, whatever it might be. We take the first breath, we welcome the first question, we receive the next moment, we get going. And in this way, step by step, day by day, breath by breath, we move forward in our own path of healing and developing and awakening. And of course, along the way, contributing to other people. This webinar is the kickoff for my Neurodharma online program. And this webinar is also a free introduction into the neurological basis of the embodiment in our living bodies of a steady mind, a strong and warm heart, and abiding in peace. So whether you're a registered participant in the online program or you're here for the free introduction, great. I'm really glad you're here. So what's this all about? I think it starts with a recognition, with our eyes open, of what's actually true. And this recognition is in my very earliest memories, going back to probably 2 years old and maybe even younger in terms of the body memory, of a fundamental, poignant feeling I had that I think so many people have, that there's a lot of unnecessary unhappiness, a lot of unnecessary fussing and feuding, stressing, worrying, conflict. As a kid, I saw it in the grown-ups with each other. I saw it in the kids. I saw it with the grown-ups and the kids, and vice versa. And also there was a sense of possibility in us all, a sense of possibility of a lasting happiness and a longing for that in real and authentic ways. Not a quick fix, not some kind of fake it till you make it thing, but the genuine possibility of a durable, fundamental steadiness of mind, warmth of heart, and inner peace that we can have more and more inside of ourselves. So what gets in the way? Well, an unsteady mind that's rattled and distracted and bombarded by all kinds of stimuli and shiny objects and pressures and stresses, that gets in the way. If we're always feeling we're on shaky ground, we can't enter into life in a way that's good for ourselves and others. Also, if our heart is wounded and resentful and insecure, that also gets in the way in terms of this lasting happiness. And the other thing is that if we're preoccupied with inner stresses and worries and pressures and also the long shadow maybe cast by our childhood, that also gets in the way. Okay, so we start with the problem, right? We start with a recognition of suffering, broadly defined, from very subtle to extraordinary and horrible and intense. And we also start with a sense of possibility. It doesn't have to be this way. We may not know how to get there, but we know in our heart it doesn't have to be this way. And one of the primary sources of that knowing in the heart that it doesn't have to be this way is that there is a core of being already inside us, grounded in our own biology, maybe stretching into something mysterious and beyond, but minimally, and this is where I'm going to stay right here, inside our own nature, there is a core inside us. We've all felt it. It's our home base, a home base that's fundamentally wakeful, present, strong, undefeated by whatever passes through our mind, loving, and wise. That is in the core of our being. In ourselves, and also looking out at other people, we can see that core inside expressed, particularly in people who are very, very far along in practice. I think about my own experience as a rock climber, and I would watch people who are like human geckos. They were so good as climbers. And then I would kind of imagine, what's it like to be you, right? How do you do that? And then I would imagine being like them, and I'd be a better climber. So if we want to get good at anything, we study, we observe people who are really good at it, and then we kind of reverse engineer, I use that term really lightly, reverse engineer their state of being. Like, what are the causes in their own mind? What's happening inside their body, even neurologically, that enables them, and sometimes us, to stay calm and centered inside when everything's falling apart, to feel confident and worthy, and also kind and strong as needed with other people. How do they do that, right? How do they feel increasingly connected with everything? How can we do that? And how can we let go of stressing and craving, and to use some traditional terms, letting go of hatred and fear, letting go of greed and drivenness and possessiveness, letting go of hurt and grievances and old feelings of shame and inadequacy, and letting go of ignorance and delusion. How do we actually do that? So that's the how of that. It deeply interests me. I'm kind of a methods guy, practical person, longtime therapist and teacher, and someone who's really worked with this material himself. So how do you do that, right? In the online program I'm going to do, the Neurodharma program, we'll go through that in a lot of thoroughness. It's really quite powerful. Today, I want to offer 3 brief practices that you can take with you right away to get started on this path. So we're going to do something experiential really pretty soon. I invite you to do it. You don't have to do it. It'll probably take about 5 minutes or so. But it's an opportunity to experience from the inside out what we're talking about here. And then after the practices, I'll give you a little summary of what was plausibly happening inside your brain, inside the 3 pounds of tofu-like tissue, inside the coconut, as a friend of mine once put it. What's happening inside your brain? What the neuroscientist Charles Sherrington described as the enchanted loom, continually weaving the tapestry of each moment of experience. What was happening inside your brain when you did these practices? And then later on in this webinar, I'll talk about the 7 steps of awakening that this program I'm doing will explore, and you can start doing yourself. With regard to each of those, modern science is helping us understand increasingly what could be happening inside our own brains. When our minds are steady, our hearts are warm, we feel rested in fullness, accepting ourselves and being whole, right in the present moment, connected with everything on the edge of timeless possibility. what in the world could be going on in the brain and the body when that's happening, and how can we use that understanding to help ourselves and to strengthen those states and traits of awakening by strengthening the states and traits in the underlying nervous system that is the basis for those beautiful, wonderful, and important qualities of being. So that's what we'll be exploring here. And then I also invite you, after we do this experiential material, to practice with this, to try these practices out maybe once a day, maybe for the rest of the week, and be aware of the effects. And after this webinar, you'll receive a follow-up email with separate recordings, just giving those to you, of each of these short practices. They could be the recordings of what I'm doing here. Most likely we'll give you some really kind of nice, high quality and slightly longer versions of each one of these. So, are you up for it? You want to try a little practice here? I'm going to quickly check mission control if we're on mission. Yeah, looks okay. All right. So, as with any practice, do what's good for you. I'll offer some suggestions. It's a guided practice, so you won't be totally silent. I apologize in advance if you, like me, sometimes find too many words coming at you when you just want to be silent and meditate. This is a guided practice, so I've got to do some guiding. We'll do it in 3 steps continuously. We'll start with some suggestions for steadiness of mind, being really present, here and now, stably, aware of everything else. Then we'll segue into a kind and strong heart, warming the heart, and especially how to internalize the beneficial experiences you're having so they leave lasting traces behind as durable physical changes of neural structure and function. So you are then hardwiring the fruits of your practice increasingly into yourself. So then you can take with them wherever you go. I'll do that with you as well in the second of the 3 mini practices here about a warm and kind and strong heart. And then we'll finish with inner peace, with coming into a sense of an inner tranquility through which the winds of the world may pass while whoosh, you're okay. All right, and then we'll come back. I'll talk a bit about what was happening in your brain during them. Then I'll talk a little more about these 7 steps of awakening and this overall model that we're doing and the path we're exploring in life and in this online program, and then open it up for discussion and questions. Okay, all set? I think we're good. Great. All right, and I'm going to do these with you. So let's see here. Time check. Good. So let's begin. Find a posture that's comfortable and alert. It helps to kind of sit with a certain dignity without putting pressure on yourself or being tense, a sense of presence. You get to be here, wherever you are. You get to be in the place where you are. You're taking your place, allowed to be here. You might keep your eyes open or closed. I'll probably keep my eyes mainly open, but you need not do that. You can also stand or walk or you lie down as you do a practice. And as with any kind of guided practice, 2 things are happening. There's the movement into what's being guided experientially, and there's kind of an observing of how it's working. And sometimes we run into blocks. That's okay, because as you observe how it's working, when you do the guided practice, you can learn things about your mind. And sometimes the blocks, if they happen, are just coincidental, they're not meaningful. Other times, oh, there's something to learn about something you might be bumping into, if you do. And these practices here are accessible to all of us. They speak to our underlying nature already. So in effect, in each of these 3 practices, you're coming home. And that sense of homecoming and establishing yourself in your own true home is a really useful thing. So let's begin. For steadiness of mind, I'll offer two basic suggestions. The first is to establish the intention, a sense of unpressured determination to be really present moment after moment. It's useful to pick some object of attention for these mini meditations we're doing here, such as the feelings of breathing, so that you can just stay in touch with it, kind of help you stay present and know if you've drifted away. You can choose something else if you like, a word or an image, even a feeling. So know what your object of attention is, like the sensations of breathing. And then in the first suggestion, establish the intention to remain stably present, letting sounds pass through awareness, thoughts and feelings pass through awareness while you abide here and now. And in particular, get a sense of bottom-up intention, which means simply getting a sense of what it feels like to be stably steady here, and give yourself over to that feeling as a form of intention. You might imagine people who are really present that you know, what it would be like to be them, and giving over to that way of being. So the intention is what carries you along. Being in a current or a really warm and calm river, just carrying you forward into steadiness of mind, so that you're continuously present and aware of your object of attention. The second suggestion, based on how your brain works, and I'll explain it later, is to get a sense of your whole body, or your body as a whole, as you continue to focus on your object of attention, such as being aware of the feelings of breathing throughout your body, all together, your body as a whole, steadily. Being aware of anything as a whole, including your body as a whole, will help to steady your mind. You can feel increasingly stable, increasingly grounded. To the extent that you feel steady and stable and grounded, let it sink in. Be aware of what this feels like. Letting this steadiness establish itself in you increasingly as you establish yourself in it. Okay, now the second practice for a kind heart. Keeping it simple, focusing on the experience, the sensations and feelings, not getting complicated uh, in the story or narratives. Being aware of one or more beings you care about, a pet, a friend, a child, perhaps multiple beings. What's it feel like to have compassion or to feel friendly or loving? And if you want, you can even focus on these feelings of compassion, kindness, and love as your new object of attention, kind of marinating in warm-heartedness. You might want to put a hand on your heart or on your cheek. It's a form of embodying this experience to help it be stronger in you. There could also be a sense, if it's real for you, of being cared about yourself. Again, uncomplicated, simply focusing on the feeling of being liked or loved. And yeah, to the extent there is warm-heartedness, you might have a sense of breathing through the heart area, in and out. As you feel this, stay with it. Let yourself become absorbed in warm-heartedness, lovingness. Feeling it in your body. And getting a sense of it sinking into you, like warm water into a sponge, or even a soothing balm coming into you. Perhaps filling up hollow places inside or hurting places inside. Again, keeping it simple, focusing on the feelings. Attentive, if you want, to what feels good about this, what's rewarding about it. Okay. And then expanding on this warm-heartedness, now the third little practice here, inner peace. As you rest in this warm-heartedness, explore what it's like to breathe in and out through the heart area. Have a sense of that. Focusing on long exhalations so that the duration of your exhaling is longer than your inhaling. for at least a few breaths in a row. And then when you like, you can move back more into a natural rhythm. I'll do this with you. And as you exhale, letting go. Letting go of tension in your body. Letting go of any stresses or preoccupations for now, at least just letting them go for now. No need for them now. And letting in a growing tranquility. Body calming, mind becoming more tranquil like a pond in the mountains. Even if a little breeze blows and ruffles the surface, a few inches down, certainly a few feet down, the pond is calm. A sense of an inner peacefulness in the core of your being. And we'll take the last minute or so and simply resting here, steadily, grounded, with a warm heart, full of peace. Okay, finishing up here. I appreciate your willingness to go on a little journey with me, and in a way, 12 or 15 minutes we spent right there is an example of the journey we take, the path we're on. And it's a taste of this longer path and journey we'll be doing with the full 7 practices of awakening that I'll talk about in a moment. But before I do that, I just want to mention, as I said, what was happening inside your own brain, which is kind of remarkable to appreciate. What was that enchanted loom weaving? What was it doing when you were steadying your mind or warming the heart or resting in peace? So really briefly, not trying to give you a big lecture here, especially while we're meditative, 2 forms of establishing an intention to steady the mind. One is from top down. That's useful. We know that one. Another one, though, I think is more powerful, is from the bottom up. That's where we give ourselves over as a form of, someone asked the question, unpressured determination. We give ourselves over to our highest purposes or our aims or values or what calls us. Instead of scratching and clawing our way up the mountain, I know what that's like. That's pressured determination. Unpressured determination is to surrender to a wholesome resolve and the feeling of it from the bottom up that carries us along. Well, top-down intentionality very much engages the prefrontal cortex, kind of the center of executive function in the brain, the chair of the committee telling us what to do. All right. But this other form of intention taps into much more ancient and primal portions of the brain that are sensory oriented and reward oriented in the brainstem and subcortex. The brain basically has three floors, three sections, more or less, like a house. There's the bottom floor of the brainstem, then the second floor of the subcortex with things like the amygdala, and also the basal ganglia and the striatum, which are very involved in a sense of reward. And then on top of that is the third floor of the house of the brain, the neocortex, it's called, that is very recent and modern. So we need all parts of the brain, but one powerful way to give yourself over to your wholesome resolves is to get a feeling of what it would be like to have that intention fulfilled already, and then give yourself over to it. Second thing I said was feel your body as a whole, and there's a lot of neat neuroscience related to that. Quick summary: when we're caught up in the past or the future and ruminating and have a strong sense of I and we're kind of all distracted, we tend to engage the midline of the cortex. But research shows that when we drop into the present with less sense of self, less sense of stressing, we're not distracted, we're not bouncing all over the place, we engage networks in the side of the brain, especially right-sided for right-handed people and some left-handed people, because that's the hemisphere that does gestalt holistic processing, takes things as a whole. And for some left-handed people, it's just reversed, it's on the left. But the idea is the same. Reducing activity in the midline and dropping into lateral networks, especially right-sided, helps us disengage from fascinations and ruminations and preoccupations with the future and the past, and ka-thunk, drop into the present. And one powerful way to engage these lateral networks is with a sense of things as a whole, such as your body as a whole or the whole volume of the room as a whole. That helps to steady the mind. And as with all this stuff, check it out, right? The risks are low. If something's uncomfortable or disturbing, obviously back away. But these are the kinds of things you can explore in the inner laboratory. We're all scientists in a sense. The deep root of the word for science is to know. And interestingly, the deep root of the word for Buddha is also to know, to understand deeply. So we can understand deeply in our own inner laboratory and run little experiments and see how they turn out. Okay. Kind heart, we tapped into experiences of being cared about and especially caring. And then I focused on the process of what's called positive neuroplasticity, where we don't just have a passing experience that's momentarily nice and leaves no value behind. Instead, we help the experience we're having convert, get installed as a lasting change of neural structure and function. In other words, to move from state to trait, which is the fundamental process of growth. Without state to trait change, no healing, no development, no awakening. Nothing has lasted. So there are multiple ways to move from state to trait. I spoke through several of them, following the model you may know it in my work called the HEAL process. HEAL stands for 4 steps of internalization grounded in neuroscience. I walked you through the E and A step, or the have, enrich, and absorb step. HEAL stands for link, where you let something that's positive connect with something that's negative. You might have had a little sense of that, taking in lovingness into wounded or empty places inside. But the essence is really straightforward. It's kind of summarized in this famous saying, neurons that fire together wire together. The longer we keep them wiring, the more embodied it is, and the more intensely they fire, the longer we keep them firing, rather. And the more it's embodied and the more we kind of focus on what's rewarding about it, the more they're going to tend to wire together. All right. And then last, inner peace. As we exhale, the parasympathetic wing of the nervous system gets engaged. It's the natural balance for the sympathetic branch of the nervous system, which is involved with fighting and fleeing or stressful reactivity to things. And so as we exhale, we engage that parasympathetic branch, which is sometimes called the rest and digest branch of the nervous system, which is calming and soothing, and a foundation for a growing tranquility, growing inner peace. If you're stressed out, you're in a situation, and it's kind of nice because no one will notice you're doing this, right? Business meeting, dinner with the in-laws, who knows? Long exhalations, at least one, maybe three or more. That's naturally calming and soothing, and brings the needle back of your inner stressometer, the inner stressometer. Okay, so that's a quick summary there. And I want to segue briefly and then open it up for discussion into the ways in which what we did here are examples of these fundamental qualities present in beings who are awakened or very far along that we can find in our own core of being. And as we cultivate 7 fundamental qualities in ourselves, we both uncover our own true nature and we train ourselves. We develop ourselves in ways that are actually hardwired. They're embodied in our own nervous system so that we can count on them. Not a quick fix here. Lasting results. So when I look out there at people who are really far along, I see 7 fundamental essential qualities that summarize a lot of material in the contemplative traditions, in the spiritual traditions, and also in secular interest in self-actualization, peak experiences, the upper reaches, the heights of human potential. So I'll go through the 7 right now. And for me, these are both the results of practice and forms of practice. In other words, we can take the fruits of practice, wonderful ways of being, as a path of practice. As they say in Tibet, taking the fruit as the path. So these practices are, and I'll express them as practices, steadying the mind. And we got a taste of that already. Second, warming the heart. Got a taste of that too. Third, resting in fullness. What I mean by that is equanimity, disengaging from the machinery of craving by experiencing an increasingly internalized, felt sense of needs sufficiently met already so that you can meet challenges to needs with strength and confidence and without being invaded and disturbed in the core of your being. In other words, you're establishing, as we rest in fullness, an increasingly stable background sense or holistic sense of peace, contentment, and love. So those are the first 3. They're foundational. Most people have a sense of them very readily. And on the basis of those 3, we launch into the deep end of the pool. The 4th practice is being wholeness. What I mean by that is accepting yourself fully, being undivided internally, having access to and a healthy relationship with every room in the mansion of your mind, including the ones in the basement, maybe with some smelly things inside, and getting a sense increasingly of simply abiding as mind as a whole, including awareness in a non-dual way. In other words, without dualistic divisions inside yourself. That's being wholeness. Then the 5th practice, receiving nowness. Getting as close as you can continuously at the front edge of now, the emergent edge of now, being comfortable with a growing recognition of impermanence, the ways in which things continually change and end, while also being continuously renewed and being increasingly okay, hanging out right in the now, with a serene complexion, as the Buddha put it a long time ago, or as Eckhart Tolle puts it, with the power of being in the now, now after now after now, receiving nows. And then the 6th practice and it's a quality of mind I observe in these people, is opening into wholeness, a sense of being connected with everything. Less sense of self, less sense of me, myself, and I, not taking life so personally, and more having a feeling of being supported, actually, by the web of interconnectedness that's actual with nature, with other people, and by extension, the universe altogether. Wow. And then in the seventh practice, finding timelessness, that's an exploration of what maybe is meaningfully distinct from the natural world of conditioned, determined actuality. This is a field of the Buddha called unconditioned, or I call it unconditionality. Others might speak of it as the transcendental field of possibility. And we can explore what is like it, minimally, in terms of possibility, spaciousness, and stillness, so that we have a sense of becoming increasingly accessible to. We have increasing intimations of what could well be the actual unconditioned, timeless, eternal, transcendental. So those are the seven. And for each of these, remarkably, modern science is telling us ways in which the brain can be operating to enable those ways of being. In other words, what's the hardware doing? Well, in the mind, the software, we're feeling really steady, loving and strong, at ease, without being disturbed, accepting ourselves fully in the present, connected with everything, with a sense of timeless possibility. Always just in effect before emergent actuality. What's that like, right? What could be going on in the body? So I've been looking into this. I've really developed this material. I didn't invent it, I pulled it together, but it's grounded in science and certainly plausible. And through understanding more, what could be going on in your own living body when you're in the zone, or more like them who are in the zone, then through understanding it, you can be more skillful. You can be more effective in real ways in the flow of everyday life, right in the whole mess as it is, to generate these ways of being and then help them increasingly stabilize themselves in you. So those are the seven qualities of awakening. They all work together. We can have a taste of each one, and then we can develop it fully. I arrange them in kind of a path. I think of them as steps of awakening. And it's a path that's good in the middle, good in the beginning, and certainly good in the end. This path is explored very experientially in this online program I'm doing. And because that's the real point. The point here is not theory. It's not theology, and it's not philosophy or research papers. As cool as those things may be, it's about experiential embodiment, living our way into these seven ways of being and living from them increasingly. So that's a path we can all take. And in a structured way, I'm going to be exploring it in this online program that starts this Saturday. So if you're already registered in that program, I'm really excited about doing it with you. It's really powerful and cool. And also, if you want to check it out yourself, if you're not yet registered in it, after this webinar is over, we'll be sending you an email with information about it and a link, and so that, and a coupon code, actually, woohoo, if you want to do it yourself. And I really, really, really invite you into it. Okay, so I think I'm finishing up my presentation, as it were, here, and I'm really interested in some questions and comments that have come in. So I'm going to take a quick peek here at what Stephanie has sent me. And I can see, all right, we have a lot here. And I'm going to need to get organized about which one I cover. So a couple things. So with regard to the course itself, Cheryl asks, are there, if I understand the question, reading materials as part of the program? Yeah, definitely. So the program itself is video recordings of a retreat I taught. And then also there are the audios of all the meditations, there are bonus materials of special interviews I did, my responses in some cases to questions from people at the retreat, and some really neat and useful written material. So we've got that cool stuff that are happening there. Then another question. How can these practices, this is from Jen, complement 12-step recovery? Well, that's a great question because two parts. First, it's easy to think that, steadiness of mind or, receiving nowness or opening into allness is just for like yogis in cave, right? Or people on some kind of exotic retreat of some kind. No, in everyday life, the worse life gets, the more we need stability inside ourselves. The more that other people are aggravating, we need to find a way to be strong with them while also not letting them invade our heart and poison our own lovingness for our own sake, let alone for the sake of others, right? The harder things are, the more important it is to stay in the present and not get utterly preoccupied with the past or the future, right? We all need these things. And in terms of recovery, there are aspects of this material that are very relevant there. It's not about recovery, but it's certainly complementary in that, for example, in fullness, if you feel full already, there's less movement, there's less hunger for getting pleasure from the outside or anesthetics, in effect, from the outside in. Also, the more you're in the present, less preoccupied with the future or caught up in the past, there's less movement to use or do one thing or another that's bad for you and other people. So for me, they really, really work together. And I find one of the neatest aspects of this material is to kind of reverse engineer what people are like who enjoy appropriate pleasure. They have a nice meal with friends, they watch their favorite basketball team winning a championship or losing a championship. But deep down inside, they're okay either way. They're fundamentally okay either way. And that for me is very relevant for addictive topics. Okay, another person, let's see, just moving along. From Courtney, unpressurized determination, question mark. Yeah, I just made up that phrase on the fly, but it's a good one, right? Unpressured determination. But it really speaks, as I said, to the feeling of giving yourself over to your resolve, right? Without feeling driven about it. So you're working hard, you're engaged, you're determined, you're clear, you're strong, but you don't feel contracted or stressed at the same time. And that's a wonderful place to experience. We don't have to be stressed and contracted to be firm, determined, clear, persevering, even when we're tired, hanging in there. And one thing that helps as well is to be at peace with whatever happens. It's appropriate to have preferences, to really want your child to have a good health outcome, or to really want another person to love you. It's okay to want that, but deep, deep down inside, in our own inner temple, can we still be at peace and content and intact in the core of our being, even when, because in this life, we never get everything we want, in a sense, although we can, I think, always get everything we want in a different sense. To be content, though, with the ordinary disappointments and frustrations of this life. That, to me, is what I mean by unpressured determination, and that's something we can cultivate increasingly with these factors of steadiness, fullness, and a growing training in resting in nowness, connected with everything. The more you feel like a local expression of everything, you are a person, you have rights and responsibilities of your own, and more, as you feel the truth, which it is true, that we are a local expression of everything, acting locally, as us, through us. That's true, but we don't really feel it usually. To increasingly feel it, oh, it's so reassuring. You start to feel like, you just fall back in the arms of reality. It will carry you along, which includes a very clear-eyed recognition of who you cannot count on, and the challenges and the injustices and the terrible things that are happening in the world. Nothing in this program is about positive thinking or ignoring the needs of other people. Actually, and there's so many examples of this, as people cultivate these 7 qualities of awakening as both the fruit and the path. As people cultivate these 7 qualities of awakening, they become less selfish. I can say for myself, I become less of a jerk, although I can still go there sometimes, but we won't talk about that here. Anyway, you just become stronger. Your cup is runneth over. Your cup runneth over, so you have more for other people. We don't just practice for ourselves. We practice for the sake of others, too. And as we cultivate these 7 qualities in us, we have more to give others. And in fact, actually, I should add, the way this online program works is that it goes through these 7 steps of awakening, but the beginning is foundational. It's sort of coming. And then the last part is about integration. It's about really moving it into your life and using it to make your own offering increasingly out there into the world. So it's about developing oneself in part to increase one's capacity for contribution to others. Okay, next one. Let's see. Can this material help fear, terror, and suicidal thoughts? This is from someone anonymous. I have deep despair despite years of meditation, being aware, looking at the suffering, etc. Well, first of all, I feel for you. I can feel what you're saying here. And so this online program and these practices in general, whether you do the online program or not, they are not a treatment for anything. On the other hand, wow, as steadiness develops and fullness develops, they can be really, really helpful. That said, there are other causes and conditions that lead to despair, suicidality, fear and terror, the legacy of trauma that's still there, maybe something biological in terms of underlying neurochemistry, maybe circumstances. If we're in circumstances where we're being mistreated and abused every day, inner practice helps, but it's not going to take care of everything. So it's important to really acknowledge what else there might be to deal with. That said, and I really do observe that these forms of practice can be really helpful. So what I would say to you, who's asking the question, is to ask yourself, are there stones unturned? You've done a lot of practice yourself. You have background in meditation. I'm sure you've looked at the suffering. I bet you've done some therapy. What else could be helpful? And that's why when you look at these 7 qualities of awakening, maybe there's some of them that you haven't explored yet as fully as you might that could really potentially serve you. And that's a general principle, to look for stones unturned. All right, let's see here. I'm kind of rolling through. Great. So Brooke offered a wonderful question. Stephanie, I'm just keep going. So, oh, great. Someone said my laundry room, this is my converted laundry room, is a safe space. Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, I'm going to scroll down, see what else has rolled in recently. Ding, ding, let's see. Can these practices work through the trauma legacy without going to psychological therapy? I would just say about that it's kind of, I spoke to it a moment ago. To be clear, these practices are not a substitute for professional treatment, A. B, the practices themselves can stir things up. So we have a fair amount of material in the online program about, being cautious, taking your time with it. Depends on personal vulnerabilities. Some people have kind of more, just kind of, there's more stuff to bubble up. And so if you know that about yourself, that's okay, that's fine. In effect, there's more opportunity there for value, paradoxically, if you think about it. If there's a lot of crud there, so bad news, good news, not to trivialize it, I'm just saying that's a way to reframe it that can actually be kind of useful. That said, knowing yourself, be careful with this material. And that said, to repeat the point, these are resources. I had a realization some time ago that perfecting the mind is like trying to polish Jell-O. You just can't do it. It's imperfectible. The mind, well, more exactly, the psyche, I'll just say that, is imperfectible. There's just stuff, endless stuff. Maybe when someone is utterly enlightened, God realized, whatever frame of reference you want to have, literally, totally, nothing else can land in there. I think that is an operational definition of enlightenment that's psychological. It's the mind in which no form of greed, hatred, heartache, or delusion can last. Maybe it rises, but it's self-liberated very, very quickly. All right. But for people like me who are not there yet, meanwhile, stuff comes and goes. But as you deepen your keel in the water, in your personal sailboat, so you're steadier and stabler, and as you grow, literally woven into physical changes in your body, especially in your brain, an unshakable core of inner peace and contentment and love. As you do that, you recover more rapidly from the way the trauma material hits you, or you get re-triggered these days, or just annoyances from other people. You recover a lot more quickly, and it doesn't invade the core of you. It's more like it's on the surface. I think about times I've been in the ocean or in swimming pools, and there could be disturbance on the surface of the water, but a few feet down, it's quiet. 10 feet down, you can hardly tell there's a storm raging overhead. That's what these practices can offer to us. And in a way, also, most fundamentally, we start seeing through the nature of the experiences we're having. And we start recognizing that all of them have the same nature. They're impermanent, they're compounded, they're dependently arising, they're empty of essence. They exist, but they're insubstantial. We start recognizing that more and more. We disentangle from them, and we become less implicated by them and burdened by them. They're transient, passing eddies in the stream, as it were. And increasingly, we experience ourselves as the stream of existing, passing through the banks of unconditioned, timeless possibility. That is pretty good. Okay, a few more. I'm going to wrap up definitely on time. I want to repeat the point that this program itself starts Saturday. If you're already registered in it, you're already set up. And if you want to do it or check it out, just click the link that we'll send you, and you can learn more and sign up and get into it. Okay, let's see. Am I a Capricorn? No, I'm a Libra Scorpio. I think it's a good description of me, actually, about 60-40. Anyway, so let's see here. Okay, Anonymous asks, will this program help prepare my brain, namely an enlarged amygdala and reduced hippocampus from narcissistic abuse? Wow. Again, sorry about that. And clearly you're bright and you understand a lot of what has happened there. Technically, for others, the amygdala is sort of part of the brain that's tracking whether things are relevant, and it's especially there to track what's unpleasant or threatening, right? And research shows that traumatic experiences repeatedly can sensitize the amygdala and weaken a nearby part of the brain, the hippocampus, which puts things in perspective and calms things down. So research shows that even people, let's say with a trauma history, when they do practices, can repair the underlying neurobiology. It may take a lot of practice for a full repair, and there could be a residue anatomically or physiologically, structurally, of lasting impact, being realistic here. On the other hand, with practice, absolutely, even if we're constrained, even if we're kind of hitting a ceiling of what's possible with repair, we're not constrained. We're full of possibility for what we can grow alongside what's been wounded in terms of developing other resources, developing a stability of lovingness, a capacity to really rest in the present, strengthening the neural networks, which I'll be exploring in this program, about the sense of allness, a sense of connectedness with everything. We can really, really, really develop those things. And I want to use this actually, if I can, as a way to finish here and make the point. In my background in the mountains, I've had friends and guides who were further up the path than I was, and they would turn and smile and beckon me onward. In the same way, I think beings throughout history and in the present day who are farther along the path, they're farther up the mountain, if you will, they're turning to us and beckoning us onward. There is no secret path. It's a path that's for everyone. We need to walk it. We need to walk it. But it's wonderfully true that no one can stop us from walking this path of awakening ourselves and joining those who are farther along and with a smile, beckoning to us to join them. So I really, really wish you well. I'm so glad you did this today and with me. I hope you check out this program if you're not already in it. And I also hope that you keep practicing and you keep walking this path for your own sake and that of all beings. So really, may you be well. Take good care.
Auto driving mode activated.